This
question.
conference will now be recorded.
All right, so here we go. Having some tech issues. All right, so the things we're going to talk about, first of all, are just always that review of a balanced assessment system. What are the goals? And then, like I mentioned, some updates. We're going to talk about the three types of science assessment: summative, interim, and formative. And then finally, as I mentioned, some opportunities for you all to get involved. So you probably have seen this little thing before, our little three-legged stool that represents the three legs of the MONTCAS system. We have summative assessment and our interim assessments, which summative assessments, of course, are given at the end of the year and have a specific purpose to measure college and career readiness. The interim assessments measure progress toward that goal and can also be used at the classroom level. And of course, formative assessments to improve instruction and student learning. And I like to also kind of keep in mind that there are many different users who use the assessment data that we collect, all of us in different ways. And the summative assessment is really just a very small part of the process. It's used really for accountability. Schools and districts use it more for instruction, planning instruction, programming, and that type of thing. Classroom teachers really needed the formative assessment for their instruction. And just a reminder that, as always, our main clients here that need all of this information are students and parents, and keeping them in mind as we look at this information. So I want to start with an update on Montana's summative assessments for science. So most of you probably know, but we are still communicating some changes. We have the ACT given in grade 11 to all Montana juniors in partnership with the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education, or OCHE. We have the Montana Science Assessment, or the MSA, which is given to students in 5th and 8th grade because that aligns with the grade band benchmarks established within the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS. And we also have the alternate Montana Science Assessment given in grades 5, 8, and 11 for our students with the most severe cognitive disabilities. And of course, the AMSA is also aligned to the NGSS. So these tests can all be taken online. The ACT can also still be taken by paper, which is how most of our schools do administer it. There were quite a few hoping to try out the online version this year. And of course, we all know they didn't get to do that, but that is a transition that is encouraged. But of course, it's a lot that goes with it. So that's still definitely a transition. So first, to talk about ACT science, of course, Montana juniors have been taking all the subsections of the ACT test for several years now, including reading, English, math, science, and writing. ELA and math scores have been used for accountability since 2017. Science scores have always been reported on GEMS, but they haven't been sent to the federal level. They haven't been used as a formal accountability measure. Beginning this spring in 2020, the ACT science subject test was to have been used as Montana's measure of high school readiness in science. Due to the pandemic-related cancellations, our activities related to this were a little bit interrupted. And so we do anticipate ACT testing for all subjects will be on track for spring 2021. We are still planning to conduct standard setting for ACT science sometime during the 2021 fiscal year. We're still working out some details with that. And then following that, once that's complete, we will be able to submit the information to the U.S. Department of Education. By December of 2021 is our deadline for the peer review process. One thing that is not specific to science, so it's a little bit off topic, but I wanted to take the opportunity to share the information. There will be fall testing available to districts October 6th and October 20th. The part of the equation that will be different is that the schedule of events will be consolidated. So the deadlines for accommodations and setting up some of the ordering and things like that in PA Next and the rosters will be a little bit condensed. And so we want to start getting the word out to watch, to have your STCs watch for emails about those dates and to keep an eye on the website for the ACT schedule of events. There'll be a separate one as soon as the fall testing is over. There'll be a separate schedule of events posted for next spring's ACT testing. Okay. Actually, why don't I stop there? If there are any questions, might be a good time. If there are any specific questions about ACT. Okay, we will forge ahead. Okay. The other two summative tests for science that we manage out of our office are the MSA and the AMSA. So for both of these assessments, development activities took place throughout the 2019-20 school year. Items were developed by the test vendors, then reviewed by the OPI state team and by Montana educators. And we were all set to go. And the test window opened as planned on March 16th. And of course, that's the same week schools closed. So no students were able to take the MSA or the AMSA. So this means that we don't have any data for those assessments yet. And the reporting waiver that we had had approved by the Department of Education, that will expire before our next testing period. So we are having to adjust our plans. For 2021, we're planning an operational field test. So this means that items will be analyzed. The students will receive it, what looks to them like a normal test, which they would have under the census field test as well. But in this case, the items will all be analyzed. Those that don't work will be taken out of the pools, and then the adjusted results will be used for ESSA reporting and standard setting and all of those activities that we do after testing. So that's not an ideal process to do it that way, but we work with what we have, so that's okay. In summer 2021, those results will be used to conduct standard setting for both the MSA and the AMSA, so that proficiency categories can be set up and cut scores be established for advanced, proficient, near proficient, and basic categories of performance. One aspect of summative testing is that, of course, we want to make sure students have every opportunity to succeed. And so we want to make sure everyone knows that there are practice and training tests available for the summative science assessments. So on the testing site, you can access the practice and training tests, and they're labeled in both ways because the groups of states that we belong to call them different things. And so they apply both labels. Practice and training tests are both the same thing for our state. So there are tests available for both AMSA and MSA. These are intended to provide teachers and students with some experience related to the online test format. For the MSA in particular, there's a variety of item interaction types available, so students can practice using the various tools and see all the different interactions, and teachers can also practice setting up the accommodations and see how specific PEs might be assessed. So there are a lot of really useful resources there. So a few notes about those that we want to make sure are clear, though. There'll be some changes. Those tests were available last year, but they'll be a little different for this year coming up. So there will be a high school practice test, but we want to make clear that that really is only meant to be an auxiliary to use with the interims, which I'll talk about here in a minute. It's not really meant to be a direct support for ACT prep. There is alignment with ACT science standards with the practices that are in the NGSS, but it's not set up the same way. And so we want to make that really clear. The practice test from AMSA is borrowed from Hawaii, and their standards are a little bit different. And so as far as standards coverage, the practice test for the alternate science test is not quite aligned to the way that our actual test is. And then finally, the MSA practice test, thanks to some teachers who contacted us with some really great feedback after they tried it out last year. And we collected that from teachers from all the states that participate in this. And so there will be a new practice test put up in late September or late August, early September that takes into account the feedback that we received from all of those teachers. I did want to take just a second to show the site where those are housed. And so it's right here. So right here is the regular, the MSA practice test, and the alt test is here. And so if you have some time to go in there and play around, you also can find links to them down here. But it's definitely a useful tool because you can look at the tools, the online things like crossing off, answer choices or the graphing, or it's a very different kind of test. If we have some time at the end, we could maybe come back and look at that. So I'll leave this link open. Okay. Okay, so this is a big update. We have been able to add interim science tests to our suite of tests in science that we offered for this year. So those are really set up to provide teachers with quick data, just information about their students at a given time. They're focused on individual standards. So they'll be available for all 3 grade bands. The bank includes a cluster of items for most of the PEs. They're not 100% coverage, but they are working on building that bank. Teachers can preview the clusters online, so you can log in with your account and see what the students will see. And then you also can get a PDF answer key that includes standards alignment information. The interims are automatically scored online in the system, and they'll be reported online in the same place that the Smarter interims are scored. And so we have not seen exactly what this looks like yet, but it is designed to be very similar to Smarter Balance. So if you're using those, it will be helpful. This is a screenshot from another state's interim assessment page. Ours isn't built yet, but this is kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like. It's basically just broken down by PE. So as I mentioned, those should be available by mid-September, and we will be putting out more information as those are developed and available. They will be part of the assessment roadshow that Dwayne is putting on starting in August and September. So if you have an opportunity to attend one of those, you might be able to interact with those interims. There will be some special information on the assessment site, of course. We're working on some instructional videos, and there will be information on the testing site hosted by Cambium, where you access your resources for Smarter Balanced and the other science stuff. So let me just pause and see if there are any questions. Anything about ACT, MSA, AMSA, practice tests, or interims? Okay, so I see. Yeah, I see that from Jessica. So we do have on the science page, there's a document that shows the alignment between the Montana standards and the Next Gen standards. So it's on the curriculum, the science, stumbling over here, but the standards and curriculum page. So let me see if I can bring that up real quick, because that is a very good question. And that is right here. It's the Montana to NGSS comparison document. Does that help, Jessica? It's when you dig into it, it's a spreadsheet. I kind of don't want to max out my internet here and open another thing, but it's pretty straightforward and it is very helpful. Oh, that's my slideshow. Okay, any other questions? I see Michelle shared the link to that document directly in the chat. I think she did.
I did.
Okay. Okay, my chat's just catching up. So let me go ahead and look through here for a second. I had a little bit of a glitch there. Sorry if I cut out for a minute. Okay. I see. The training test and the interim test are two different things. Yes, they are. The training tests, the teachers are provided the answers. The interim tests, they cover only one PE at a time. It's one cluster of questions, and those are scored automatically, and score reports are sent back on individual students. You will not be able to get score reports on the training test. You have to use your answer key. And honestly, unless it has changed, the training tests are a little challenging. And so we did try to bring that down a little bit, but they are meant to focus on the interactions, not the content as much. Well, give you an idea of the content, but they really do focus on the different types of interactions and give the kids practice with the screen work. So can the interim test be done whole class for practice? Yep, you could just have all your kids log on at the same time and take those clusters as a group. Yep. And if you wanted to work on with more than one PE, you would simply assign more than one cluster. Is the data from the interim test collected for accountability? It is not. Just the summative test in the spring is used for accountability. The interim test, those score reports are sent only to the teachers. We use them at the state level. I might need some help answering this if we use them for any kind of analysis, but we don't use them for any kind of accountability or reporting.
That's correct, Ronnie.
Yeah, we won't use any of this information. It's really for student and educator use only. Some of the information from the interim assessments for Smarter Balance has helped inform our work internally on understanding kind of the impact of these interims in a positive way to help with student performance or gains in understanding what that looks like. But those are really just to know more at that kind of state level what's working and all of those facets as far as an implementation program for our suite of assessments, but there will be no accountability metrics or anything applied to the use of the interims, because again, the whole purpose and lens for this is to support students and teachers.
Thank you, Ashley. Okay, another question. Are the interim tests similar to the other subject area interims that are currently available? Do we get the same types of data? So we have not seen the reports yet for these. We're still working on what they will look like. The test, I think it would be safest to say that they are most similar to the IABs for Smarter Balance, meaning that they focus just on a small chunk of content. So if you look at these interims and, you know, this summer when we have more access, or late this summer, we'll be able to show you the interims, but right now we just don't have that access. So they really just are one set of questions. So a cluster, think of it as a reading passage in a reading test with a number of interactions related to it. And so there might be 3 or 4 questions related to that PE, and they try to assess it in a 3-dimensional manner. So there might be a question that gets at the cross-cutting concept. There might be a question that gets at the practice, and there might be a question that gets at the DCI that's being assessed, the main science content. And there might be an interaction that involves all of those activities. Some of the graphing or the simulation are pretty involved. And so even though there are only 3 or 4 questions, it still could take 10 to 15 minutes, maybe around 10 minutes for a cluster to be answered. How do the comparisons of the training tests compare to the interim tests? Is that related to the, Sally, are you referring to how they compare to the NGSS standards? In any case, the training tests and the interim tests are all based on the next generation standards. We belong to a group of states that works together to develop these, and we definitely have a lot of input, and we have certain items that are developed with Montana students in mind, but we do borrow items from the other states as well. And so the next gen standards are kind of our high level guiding principle, and then we work from there in adjusting some things. So the document that Michelle shared earlier that shows the correlations between the Montana standards and the next gen standards will show kind of how everything fits together. But both sets of tests are based on those same things. If we help students with interim tests to boost confidence, would that mess up your data at the state level? I'm not sure how to answer that. Ashley, can you speak to that a little bit again?
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question, but I believe the intent is if we're using the interim assessments in kind of a practice or training mindset, will that essentially make our inferences on the impact of the inferences not as valid? And if I'm understanding that correctly, so what we do is, as far as kind of using the data from the interim assessments with previous work, one example would be through our Montana Data Use and Culture grant, where we just kind of looked at the usage and performance from using both the interim comprehensive assessments and the interim assessment blocks, and looked at kind of those test taking observations and compared those to their performances on the summative assessment. And so given that level of analysis, it's really a statistical approach. And so any anomalies that we would see in the data, so some wiggle here or there because the interims were given in a different way, kind of with that lens of practice and training, should be removed because we're looking at 95% confidence within those estimates. And so those outliers would fall out.
Yeah, we really do want the teachers to use these tools however they help you best. So, you know, I would say if that's a strategy that works for one or two of the interims to get them going, if you feel like the practice test doesn't do that for you, then definitely that's, you know, within your rights to do. I will make one note that I actually forgot about until now. One of the complaints about the practice test was that you had to work through the entire test in order and answer every question. And they were hoping to take that functionality away from the practice test. And so you could assign students just one or two questions within, and then they could scroll through to find, they could move through the test to find the questions that you want them to do, which will help that as well. So if you had tried to use the training test last year and wanted to look at, you know, something that was item one, not item one, that part will be much easier to navigate this year. You can move to the items in the practice test that you want to use. So that might help out a little bit too.
Thank you, Ronnie. That's helpful. And I just wanted to add to the question in the chat on the use for the state level, and just kind of reiterate that these aren't for accountability purposes, and really the intent is for educators and students. So currently the OPI does not have any research agenda to look at years one data of interims. So also this is an opportunity to focus on implementation and identifying whether or not these resources are beneficial to your practice. And so it's unlikely that we're going to actually probably be using any of this data to inform our work or any of those activities, because we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get their toes wet, if you will.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for those really great questions. I think those are really are helpful for us also. I did want to just really quickly show the roadshow things that we have kind of Dwayne is working on, just so you know it's available. Well, I'm not sure that's going to work. If you are interested in that, I will show that at the end also. I don't want to take too much time. And Dwayne can also add a link if he wants to directly access you for that. Okay, so the last thing to talk about is formative assessment. And this is the stuff that you all do in your classroom every day as you're teaching. We just are trying to gather resources that support 3D instruction, support science, and are accessible to Montana students. And so I have just created a list here of some links to some different resources that you might find helpful. And so we can share these out with the group or share the PowerPoint, and the links are embedded here. But really quickly, my internet is not really quick, but we have our site that includes the Science Resource Repository. This includes some classroom activities that were developed by teachers in some work that some of our OPI staff and some of you all and some other educators around the state worked on compiling and grabbing together. So that is one option for you. We also have on the Indian Education page, Jennifer Statham and her team have been working really hard to collect science lessons or create lessons that incorporate some of the IEFA standards. I showed you earlier the science standards page, and at the bottom of that, there are all kinds of great resources that as science teachers maybe you have seen, but just in case somebody hasn't, I know there's some great activities there. And of course, our Learning Hub. The science standards courses are very helpful. I found those really interesting and useful. And there are some other things here also that you might find helpful. And then the one resource that you might not be as familiar with, we are part of 3 states working together in a project referred to as Skills. And they have put together a toolkit. Some Montana teachers participated in this principled design approach to teaching and assessing. And so the Skills folks have put together lessons for the PEs that you see listed here, and this is their toolkit. So there's a lot of information here, but a lot of great ideas about how to incorporate 3D instruction into your classroom, but also how to devise your own assessments that really keep that final goal in mind, what it is that you're trying to assess, and so you don't get off in the weeds, which, you know, is pretty challenging with 3-dimensional standards to try to meet those in a straightforward way. So that's their goal, and those are some great resources here. If you've attended, you might have attended their workshops at our assessment conference. Okay, back to here. Are there any questions about any of those resources? Trying to unmute. Seems to be lagging again. Well, if you could type any questions into the chat again, that would be great. Where can we access those later? Is this a posted list? We will make a recording of this available, and these links will be embedded in the PowerPoint in the recording. And I can also, if people find it useful, I can create a document and post that on our page. Most of these are available on the OPI assessment web page. So if you dig around there, you can find them, but I could create a direct list like this, so it will look familiar. Okay. All right, so the last section or topic that we want to talk about is the opportunities that are coming up for educators to be involved in this science assessment development work. And so we have quite a few things going on. The first thing is the theory of action evaluation. These meetings are coming up. The first one is very soon. It's on June 8th. There'll be a follow-up on June 29th. And in between, there will be some work on the participants' part to really take a deep dive, really look at the status of our science instruction and assessment in Montana. And so if you were part of the theory of action development a few years back, you are familiar with that. And if you weren't, that's great too. We really want to get a cross-section of feedback. And so I will share a link in a few minutes to let you know how to get involved with that. We also have coming up on June 9th for the alternate science assessment, we have a content approval committee meeting. Unfortunately, that is filled right now, but I did want to let you know what that's all about. So the items that have been developed and gone through a couple passes of review are looked at by educators before they are sent on for field testing. And so this is a committee that will sit down and look at each item and look at the scientific content, look at the accessibility for the students. We have about half the team made up of special educators, so they can assess each item from that perspective. They'll look for bias and sensitivity issues, they'll look for technology issues, and all those kinds of things. For the MSA, we have that same activity coming up in October, and it will run parallel to the Educators Conference in Great Falls. And so if you're interested in that, you'll want to let me know. Sooner than that, here in just a few weeks in June, for the 5th and 8th grade assessment, we're hosting, or actually our vendor is hosting, an item writing workshop. And the focus of this is really how to come up with those phenomena that really will engage students and help them look at their 3D takeaways from the science that they're learning. So kind of tying it all together through the phenomena lens so that you can contribute some ideas for the MSA summative assessment, but also give you some experience for creating classroom assessments that are three-dimensional and focused on phenomena like the NGSS suggests. Later on will be a few other activities. After the operational field test for the MSA and the AMSA, we'll have some activities next summer to look at the results. We'll have some rubric validation to make sure the scoring is working right, item data review to make sure the items operate the way that they should, assess what they are meant to, and then standard setting to set cut scores for the different proficiency levels. We'll also be having the ACT science standard setting sometime in the next, I think I mentioned that earlier, in 2021 or by 2021. So I see questions. How do we get connected to the committees and the direct lists? Okay. If you are interested, the best way to let us know is to complete this form. So it's an educator interest and opportunities form. I posted the link to that form at the very beginning of the chat. So it should have been there when you all joined the group. And it's just a short form that has you fill in your name and contact information, but also, you know, kind of your experience and what it is that you're interested in participating in. There is an option for you to add other. So if you see an activity in a presentation like this and it's not on the form, feel free to fill in details about what it is you'd like to participate in. So that link is the very first entry into the chat.
Ronnie, this is Michelle.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
I'm sorry, my computer keeps saying muted, unmuted, muted, and unmuted. Anyway, I tried to scroll up to see the very beginning of the chat and I was unable to, so I don't know if that's the case for anyone else. Okay. So I'm wondering if
Let
maybe...
me retrieve. Yeah, I can retrieve that again. Because I believe I still have it open.
I just put it in the chat for you, Ronnie.
Okay, thank you, because I'm not sure I can share it that way. So, okay, are there any other questions? Make sure there's no more in the chat. So I did have a question. Are there any educators on the line that had experience with the practice test last year and have anything to share about it. Maybe nobody in this group. Oh, it was a nightmare. It was a little difficult to navigate. Okay. I started my 8th graders on the 5th grade run and it was difficult. Okay. All right. And you struggled to get into it in the first place. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, well, be sure to share your feedback when the new test is posted. No feedback was hard to get the kids motivated. Okay. Great. So a lot of this aligns with the feedback that we received and passed on to inform the development of the new practice test. So please let us know how you feel about this new version. Kiki, are you referring to computer requirements for administering the test? Okay, so those, Kiki, are available on the statewide testing site. And I will bring that up and show you right now. So resources and technical manuals. And so I can put this link in here as well. And also, some of these links will be changing because the vendor has had some changes in management. So if you go in later and need help finding that, you'll want to look back at the new link for the testing site. But they also have a help desk that can help you out when you're trying to get set up. Okay, and Ashley has posted the link for the video. Okay, can you show us some example test results and how we can use those to drive instruction? So Sandy, that is a great question. And we do not have those available yet. We are actually still working on developing what the score reports will look like. They will be in the same system that is used to deliver the Smarter Balanced score reports. And so much of the format and the way things look and the way you access them will be very similar to Smarter Balanced. And then we should be able to provide some examples and some tiebacks to instruction later this summer, possibly in the fall, when we start seeing what those result reports will look like. And I perhaps shouldn't promise even that because it's very much still in development, that part of it. Since we didn't get our field test, since this year didn't go as planned this spring, it's kind of thrown that part of it off a little bit. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that, but that's definitely on our radar, and we'll let you know as soon as we have that to pass on and work with. And actually, I guess I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but you might find the skills resources useful from that angle, because that really is the focus of their material, is how can you use assessments to improve your instruction. And so even though those aren't directly with the MSA, those might be helpful to some degree with what you're looking at. Oh, and thank you. Ashley has shared a resource about the Smarter Balanced score reports that might be helpful. The link for skills. There you go. I just put it in the chat. That's the Skills Partners website. And you want to scroll down to the section that says Principal Design Resources and start digging through there. I really like the Unpacking Tool activity, which is the second section. Okay, well, I will hang out on the line here in case anybody has any additional questions. I see we still have quite a few people online. Did